Welcome to the IonaHoops.com podcast with your host, Guy Flottico.
How about this, an in-season podcast? Season 3, Episode 7 is here with some interesting results from our first two games of the season. We're going to take a look back at them and look ahead to our next game against Vermont. We're also going to conclude our run of MAAC previews in this episode with one of our faves, Jaden Daly. So, lots to cover in this episode, but as always, we'll start with the Iona Iotas.
Iotas.
A few weeks back, you'll recall Iona had an official visit from a guard named Isaiah Pasha out of Philly. Well, Pasha committed to the Gales yesterday, just a couple hours before the game against Hofstra, and this one excites me. He's a 6'5 guard out of Cardinal O'Hara in the Philly Catholic League, and he's had offers from Xavier, VCU, URI, St. Bonaventure, GW, LaSalle, St. Joe's, Towson, Delaware, and some school named Siena. Great job by the staff getting this early commitment from this quality player. Welcome to Iona, Isaiah Pasha.
Iotas.
With the insanity that took place in Riverdale a couple weeks back, before the games began, I updated my MAAC picks and projections prior to the games kicking off. Just wanted to get that all on record here. First off, I'll update my game-by-game pick for the game at Traddy with a W now. So that's going to change my official projected records for the Gales to 22-9 overall and 16-4 in the MAAC. In terms of MAAC standings, I'm shifting Manhattan from 5th to 11th. And of course, everyone who was previously 6 through 11 moves up one spot, which promotes Quinnipiac to 5th out of the Pig. And speaking of Quinny, for my all MAAC team projections, I'm replacing Jose Perez, who I did not have as player of the year, with Mont Blanc on the first team. Lock it in, people, and note those changes were made before any games have been played this season.
Iotas.
Lots of other Iona teams are cooking right now, so let's throw an Iona their way. We start with the women's basketball team, which opened their season by dismantling Wagner 87-62. Thorana Hodge Carr led the way with 18 points and 6 boards. Juana Camillon had 17 and 4 assists. Katie Mager had 15 points. Natalia Otkadmerzuri, I'm sure I slaughtered that, at 13. And Ketsia Athias had 9 and 6 and 8 assists as well in the rout. Next up at Stony Brook on Monday. Other news, the Iona men's soccer team reached the MAAC tourney finals and will play Quinnipiac Sunday at Quinnipiac with an NCAA berth on the line. So some things to keep an eye on in the days ahead. It's been quiet on the recruiting front for a bit, but not anymore. Let's get to what is suddenly a very busy offer roundup.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
The reported offers are flying out of the Iona staff as of late. Let's start with the class of 2024 with Daniel Vieira Tuck, a 6'4 combo guard out of BTS Academy, originally out of Texas. He's a 3-star player on 247 with offers from West Virginia, Wichita State, Arkansas Pine Bluff, and LIU. You want a big guard? How about 6'8 guard? Yes, a 6'8 guard. Dink, I don't know if it's Pate or Pate, P-A-T-E, out of Dallas. He was at prolific prep for last year, and he's going to be at Lancaster High in Texas this year. This kid's big time, 5 stars on Rivals, 4 stars everywhere else, with a very healthy list of high major offers. I still like when we try for kids like this, by the way. I'm just going to put that out there. Okay, on to the class of 2025, and we'll return to BTS Academy for this one. 6'5 small forward Isaiah Stewart. He's got offers from Wichita State, Texas A&M, and Charleston State. Expect recruiting to pick up more for him. And we're going to stay at BTS Academy one more time. Forget this, a 2027 recruit. That's right, 2027. So he's an 8th grader. Mason Shepard, 6-foot combo guard. Not much known as you'd expect, but we are not his first offer. It appears Bethune-Cookman's also made a move. Looks like Ricky Johns is spearheading this string of BTS Academy players. Nice work, Coach. All right, let's recap our 2 games thus far, Penn and Hofstra. So midway through the first half of the season opener at home against Penn, Iona fans had a bit of a bewildered look. Well, some of that was due to a mysterious presence on Iona's bench. We'll get to that in a little bit. It was more so at this time that Iona trailed 17-11. The Gales looked a little clunky on offense, maybe a little unprepared, unmotivated, whatever it was, just a little lackluster. Not what we were expecting. Well, that changed big time. How about to the tune of a 36-4 run? The Gales cranked up the defense and the juices flowed on the offensive end, and Iona cruised to a 78-50 win against Penn, who was the Ivy League favorite entering the season. The Gales mostly relied on their starting five in this one, and they all delivered. Dennis Jenkins immediately became a fan favorite with pesky defense and relentless penetration on offense to the tune of a 19.6 rebound, 5 assists, 3 steal day. Quinn Slazinski had 16 and 5, Nelly Jr. Joseph 13 and 10. Guy F favorite Beric Jean-Louis had 12 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and his usual stellar D. And Walter Clayton had 9 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists with 0 turnovers. The Gales shot 41% and overall 32% from 3, so not really the sharpest shooting performance, but the D was terrific, holding Penn to 33% overall, 12% from 3, in front of an impressive sellout crowd. But despite the sellout on the performance, all eyes were actually right behind Coach Rick Pitino on the bench, where recently fired Manhattan coach Steve Masiello sat. Now, of course, Maz is part of the Pitino coaching tree, but what was going on here? Pitino explains.
I asked him to help me personally and to come to practice, sit behind the bench, and obviously he was my New York Knicks ball boy. I was best friends with his dad. He was an assistant coach with me at Louisville. He knows me probably better than anybody other than my son Richard. So he's a great coach. And the first thing I met with him 10 minutes after he got fired. And my heart, because he had a great team this year, 10 seniors, and my heart was broken for a coach. I know what I went through, and there was, outside of my family, there was very few people around to console me. Well, I'm definitely going to be there for him, because there's a great coach that never got a chance to coach his 10 seniors, and it's really tragic to do that to a person, whatever the reason may be. And I know what the reasons are. So he's part of us now, and he's part of my family. And tonight he gave me like 4 great suggestions. So I'm going to lean on him because he knows the MAAC extremely well, and it's great.
With Masiello in tow, the Gales hit the road last night in a rare, true non-conference road game under Rick Pitino at Hofstra. Well, now we know why Pitino avoids these games. The Pride absolutely scorched the Nets, and Iona's defense throughout in this one. Enough to hold off pretty strong offense from the Gales themselves, as Hofstra got the 83-78 win. Iona's game plan was clear. Take all everything guard Aaron Estrada out of the game. And led by Barrett Jean-Louis, the Gales did just that. What was not part of the game plan was having Sacred Heart transfer Tyler Thomas go 6 of 10 from 3 en route to a 26-point game, and Darling Stone Duber pouring in another 22. All in all, Hofstra shot 49% from the floor and made 14 of 29 from 3. That's 48%. So the Pride went right at Iona's strength the past few years, 3-point defense, and beat the snot out of it. Here's Rick Pitino on this, courtesy of Ken Kreitzer.
It's funny coaching young guys. My entire pregame speech was built around the Utah Jazz, New Hampshire this afternoon against Fairfield, and it was all built around guarding the 3-point shot. The entire speech, I said, do you know why Utah's winning 10 games? Ball movement, player movement, inside, out, 3-point shot. I said, Fairfield today against New Hampshire, I think made 17 threes. And my whole message was, I've been around a long time. If you don't guard the 3, you die. You must defend the 3, regardless of how many you make. And tonight, obviously, we let them shoot 14 for 29. And you got to give them all the credit in the world. They made one big shot after another. And we rotated poorly, yes, but that was their really good ball movement.
Now, Iona did some really good things on the offensive end in this one, make no mistake. The Gales shot 48% overall, 35% from 3, and had just 8 turnovers in the game. Out-rebounded Hofstra by 11, and there were some great individual performances. Quinn Slazinski had 20 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. Nelly had 17 points, 9 boards, and 6 blocks. Dennis Jenkins had 13. Berrick was in double figures again with 11, but the Gales just couldn't muster enough stops to overtake the Pride last night. Iona played this one without Oz Shima, who was in concussion protocol and should be back for Vermont. And in the post-game press conference, Pitino lamented for the second straight time that Iona needs to develop a bench. But I do want to call out that Cruz Davis, who didn't get to play against Penn, was a key part of Iona's final push down the stretch. He converted a big and one and disrupted things with his length on the other end of the floor as Iona rallied to tie pretty late, but it wasn't to be this one. One other thing I want to note before putting this one in our rearview mirror, Berrick was a +6, and no other Gale was in the positives. That means in the 30 minutes Berrick played, Iona outscored Hofstra by 6, and in the 10 minutes he sat, Iona was outscored by 11. I've been talking about Berrick's impact on this program the past couple of years, and you guys are probably sick of me doing it. But numbers like this are just why I'm so, I'm so passionate about this kid. He's not even a kid; he's a man at this point. And I just really tell a story about what he does to a game. Anyway, we move on, and Rick Pitino will go back to the lab to shore up that defense for the next one. Now that we've recapped, we look ahead to Vermont at Mohegan Sun next Friday. Two of the premier mid-major programs in the Northeast get together at a casino. What's not to love? The Gales take on the Vermont Catamounts as part of the Basketball Hall of Fame showcase at Mohegan Sun in the nightcap of a doubleheader that also features Temple and Rutgers. For Iona, it's the second time in three games thus far this season that they'll be taking on a projected first-place team in their conference. No surprise, as the Catamounts have run the show in the American East for years now. To ensure that continues, Vermont went shopping during the offseason, landing Bellarmine's Dylan Penn, an all-A Sun player a year ago. The 6'3 guard averaged 17, 4, and 5. He scores in non-traditional, unorthodox ways for guard. He posts up, he drives in, he gets rebounds. Just a different kind of guard. Penn joins Finn Sullivan, 6'4 guard, on the All-American East preseason teams. Despite that, in their 80-65 season opening win against Brown, it was last year's American East sixth man of the year, Aaron Deloney, with the huge night. The 6-foot guard scored 32, while Sullivan added 12. Game 2 for Vermont did not go as well, as they traveled to face the St. Mary's Gales on this past Thursday to start off a 3-game swing in California before returning to the Northeast to face us. Our Gale counterparts handled the Catamounts 79-53, bit of a surprising result this past Thursday. Fifth-year guard Robin Duncan led Vermont with 14. Penn had 13, while Sullivan was held to 8 and Deloney only 7 in this outing. I mentioned their 3-game trip out west. Vermont's facing Cal State Fulton this Sunday and then play at USC on Tuesday before coming home to face us on Friday. So not a lot of prep time or rest, and they'll be a bit weary from this trip, I like to think. Hopefully the Gales can take advantage up at the casino. Iona may be in the thick of the non-conference slate now, but soon enough, MAAC games are going to be here. And who better to conclude our series of MAAC previews than the one and only Jaden Daly? Let's do it. Well, if you don't know who this guy is, where the hell have you been? We wrap up our series of MAAC preview episodes with the one and only Jaden Daly. What's up, brother?
Guy, how are you, my friend? Long time no see. It's been way too long, actually.
And the season is here, and it's exciting, man. Pumped to be back, and I'm sure you are as well, that we're finally in the middle of basketball again.
Of course, it's what we live for.
Well, getting you on to this podcast this close to the season has its benefits. I'm sure you've been making the rounds, sharing your MAAC picks everywhere, but things have taken quite a turn within your coverage area, especially last week with the whole Steve Mazziello debacle at Manhattan. Before we dive into what are now everybody's updated MAAC projections for you, can you tell us, to the best of your knowledge, just what the heck went down in Riverdale?
Well, all I know, I haven't spoken to Masiello since everything had happened, and I will try to reach out to him at some point soon. All I know is from what's been put out there on Twitter. I don't want to speculate too much, especially when I don't have all sides of the story, and I also don't want to take one side against another so soon, also out of respect to Rashawn Stores, who's the interim coach now, and thrust into an impossible situation. But what I've heard so far was that it was a dispute over his contract. Masiello was entering a contract year. He got extended in 2020 for 3 years. This was the last of those 3 years. School could have handled it in March, did not, chose to let it ride out. From what I've been told, words were exchanged. I don't know the exact ramifications of everything, but as I was on the train going to New Jersey for Seton Hall Media Day, Bobby Gonzalez texted me and said he heard Masiello got let go. So I was trying to multitask two different things at once, and one thing led to another. I'm still trying to piece everything together, but everything I've heard so far suggests that it was contract related.
Crazy. So then, of course, we've had a bit of an exodus since then. It seems like that should be the end of it. I mean, we'll talk about Manhattan a bit more as we go up our standings here and get your projections. But I mean, I'm assuming at this point, we don't expect any more people leaving.
Yeah, it's just Perez, Silverio, and Diallo have all gone in their transfer portal. Obviously, Jose Perez committed to West Virginia. Silverio and Diallo are still out there. And as of about an hour and a half ago, when I checked the Manhattan roster, neither of the three are on there. But the rest of the team, including Anthony Nelson, who was second team preseason All MAAC, is still listed on the roster. So it may not be the doomsday scenario for Manhattan that some may have predicted when there were reports that 6 or 7 or maybe even more players would be leaving in the wake of Masiello's departure. So it could be an old saving face moment here for Manhattan. It could be bad, but it also could be worse.
No, and it says a lot about Stores too. I think that some of these kids said, you know what, I'm going to stay behind and stay with him. You know?
Yeah, and he played for Masiello. Obviously, I've covered him since he was a freshman and ended up coaching there. He was always going to be the guy if Manhattan ever did move on in-house. And also, I don't know if this made the rounds, but I found out on Thursday that Matt Grady resigned as well, Masiello's longtime assistant, who had been with him since day one. If you look at Manhattan's roster page right now, the only assistant coach is Tyler Wilson, who was Stores' backcourt partner for several years playing under Masiello. So there's a little bit of transition on the coaching staff. 2 assistant spots are presently vacant, so we'll see how that turns out as well.
Yeah. And that's a crazy situation. I feel terrible for the kids. I mean, again, we don't know all the facts, so it's hard to really point all the blame in one place or anything like that. And it's probably shared, some of the blame, but the kids lose out in all this. It's a shame.
Absolutely.
So hopefully they can pick themselves up off the mat. It's a great life lesson there and we'll see how they respond. So, but given that, I know I've dropped them pretty far just based on, it's hard to just imagine them picking up the pieces and putting together a decent season. So I've dropped them pretty far in my projections. I know you did not drop them all the way to 11th, and you still have that spot reserved for John Dunn's Marist Red Foxes. Speaking of mass exodus, what happened in Poughkeepsie after last season?
Well, Jawatuka and Ricardo Wright took advantage of the opportunity to play at a higher level. Obviously, both were good enough last season, and they're playing their wares elsewhere. Tuca at Wake Forest and Wright at SMU for Rob Lanier, the old Siena coach. So John Dunn is essentially doing the same thing that he did in year 2 at Marist in 1920, and that's essentially rebuilding the roster from the ground up. I still want to see what Maris does with a group of largely unproven D1 players and role players who are still there who will probably get more minutes. I want to see how this turns out. There are a lot of unknowns there. The non-conference schedule certainly doesn't do them any favors. A lot of high 200, low 300 KenPom ranked teams. So it'll be an opportunity to load up on wins before MAAC play starts. But I need to see what Marist is all about. And I think it's going to be more of a retooling year like in 1920, where they were the 11th seed and almost beat Niagara in the first round in Atlantic City.
All right. Moving up your projections. The seat's getting a little warm in Buffalo with Reggie Witherspoon and Canisius. I think everybody's got them prick near the bottom. They have a couple of nice pieces, but we don't see anything real threat. We don't see them becoming a real threat this year, right?
Yeah, and I don't think he's necessarily on the hot seat, Reggie. I think it's more of and almost a similar situation in Manhattan where the school just can't afford to buy him out. That's what I've heard from several Canisius people, that they're in such bad shape financially that they wouldn't even be able to pay Reggie for however much they owed him if they were to make a change. But Canisius does have pieces. Jordan Henderson is back again. Jakob Fritz is still there. Jameer Moultrie, who committed to LaSalle over Monmouth way back when, is in the MAAC, and he'll be in the backcourt with Xavier Long. Canisius has pieces, but I think they're a year away from really doing anything.
Okay. And we return to Riverdale for your ninth pick. You dropped Manhattan. Now you had Manhattan, was it second or third? I don't remember.
I had Manhattan third.
You had the third. So you dropped them to ninth based on the departures, and very significant ones. What makes you feel like they're going to stay out of the cellar? Just a belief in that and the guys coming back?
Well, there's enough continuity to prevent the bottom from completely falling out on them. If Nelson is able to play, and he wasn't at practice when I was up there last month, and I've heard different things. Again, I won't speculate. If he's able to get out there, and Samir Stewart is able to get back out there for a full season, Josh Roberts could be a decent big man if he can survive 25, 30 minutes a game without fouling too much. And that was one of the things that played them at St. John's too. Manhattan still has the pieces, and maybe now they can use the whole coaching change as almost a motivator to maybe get a chip on their shoulders and contend for maybe a 5, 6, 7 seed. They're going to go through some bumps in the road, and obviously you don't replace a guy like Jose Perez. You don't replace an outside shooter that you were going to get in Omar Silverio very easily. So Manhattan's going to go through it early, but they should be playing better basketball at the end of the year.
All right. So from Elite 8 in the NCAAs to Elite 8 in the MAAC, St. Peter's is 8th. And I find it's a kind of a strange approach for them this year. They're probably the only team out of the 364 or whatever it is teams in the country that probably has to go in saying, we're not going to do what we did last year. But what can they do this year?
Well, as Juju Murray goes, so too will the team. He's going to be really good, really fast. And it wouldn't shock me if he was all conference by the end of the season. You saw how vital he was and how much of a key contributor he was as a freshman last year on the team that went to the Elite Eight. It's his team to lead. Him, Omar Diame, and Isaiah Dasher, some of the holdovers from Shaheen Holloway's roster. Bashir Mason is a defensive-minded coach as well. So I don't think there's going to be too much of a stylistic change or a schematic change in terms of what St. Peter's does. It's just a matter of the younger guys stepping up and now taking on bigger roles. And I think that's going to be the biggest part of the transition process.
Mason had a lot of success at Wagner. It feels like he could have gotten to a bit of a higher spot. And yet here he is at St. Peter's, one of the lower paying jobs in the MAAC, if not the lowest. What's up with that?
Well, he never won the big one. He got to the NEC championship game 3 times and never won it. He reminds me a lot of Steve Heichel before he finally broke through in 2016 at Stony Brook. Great coach for that level, a defensive genius, and obviously he's got the pedigree under Dan Hurley, just like Peichel had under Jim Calhoun. He just hasn't been able to win the big one. And St. Peter's, with the run that it had last March, was a little more attractive. Mason probably felt he reached his ceiling in the NEC and capped out. And he's still young. He's 38. If he does something big at St. Peter's, he can still get a higher level mid-major or even a low-level P6 for a money grab. So this is a good stepping stone job for him. I actually like the potential there.
All right. We moved to Niagara at 7. There's some people who think they have a shot at the top 5. I kind of agree with that. I think Paul's is a really good coach, but I think they're just undersized, and I think it's going to hold them back. What do you think?
They've never finished worse than 6th in 3 seasons that Paulus has been there. That's a lot of goodwill that Niagara has going for them. And I actually think the smaller lineup can catch some teams off guard. My biggest concern is what they do with the 5. If it's going to be Tuba Traore, if it's going to be Harlan Obioha, the redshirt freshman that he's got. Noah Thomason could be a first-team All-MAAC guy. I'm very high on him replacing Marcus Hammond. Joe Kasperzik, who has gone through his long and winding road from being an all-rookie under Jared at Bryant before he got kicked off the team, then going to, I think it was Southeast Louisiana, and then went JUCO after that, or the other way around. But he's in the backcourt now. Sam Iorio's still there, and he's a game-changing stretch for. Paulus has the pieces. It's just going to be how Niagara matches up with everybody.
All right. So, and I've been following MAAC a long time, as you know, and it feels like anytime somebody comes into the league, they do well the first year. I don't know why you would think it'd be the other way around, but it seems to be that newcomers have success. You have Mount St. Mary's at 6. I think I've got them there as well. I don't remember now. But I believe in them. I think they're going to be pretty good.
Yeah, me too. And I had the chance to talk to Dan Engelstad at the end of September about that. And I mentioned to him, I said, Quinnipiac and Monmouth went into the MAAC their first year, and Quinnipiac was an Umar Shannon injury away from playing for the championship. It took Monmouth about 2 years to really compete. But how well do you feel that the track record for early success is conducive to the same thing in your team? And he likes what he sees from this group. Best thing that he's got going for him is he's got a lot of experience coming back between 4 and 5 year guys that are homegrown. They've hit the transfer portal very hard. They're going to be a team that catches teams off guard with that style. It's almost a hybrid of what Jamie and Christian ran there and also at Siena, and kind of what Carm did his first year in 1920. So I think if Mount can really get rolling early in the conference season, and the first half of that MAAC schedule does them zero favors, I think if they can build some momentum, they could contend for a bye.
All right. And speaking of that, so it took Manhattan's mess to get Siena into your top 5. Our friends at Siena, they were all ready to come to your house with the torches and the pitchforks and everything, but now they're in the top 5, so they're probably all right up there. I'm a big believer in Carm in terms of being a winning coach. I'm not a huge fan of him as a person, but I actually think that he wins. So why don't you have him higher?
Well, your Twitter certainly suggests that. But I was lower on Siena than I normally am this year, just because of how many new pieces Carm has. I do think that by December, January, they'll have completely proven me wrong, and this team will be a contender. I just have to see how long it takes them to come together. I do think that by the end of the year, Siena is a top 3 team. I just wanted to give them a little bit of a margin for error and a little bit of a cushion here, erring on the side of caution. I think if anybody not named Coutinho can get a team to develop early, it's Carm. And Siena will probably develop ahead of schedule and be in the mix in February. I just wanted to rate them a little lower so I could look like a genius at the end of the year.
Fair enough. All right. Quinnipiac is next. You've got them at number 4. It's so hard because every year they look at their roster and it's like, oh, there's a lot of talent here to work with. And then you look in the standings and it's like, what happened here? What's going on? Can Baker Dunleavy finally get this team over the top?
I think, and I love Baker, but I think he's on more of a hot seat than Reggie Witherspoon is at
Mhm.
Canisius. And he's only got 10 scholarship players this year. Elijah Taylor, his transfer from Notre Dame, tore his ACL. He's going to be out for the year. So he's going to go into the front court already thin with two unproven D1 pieces. Paul Otieno, the junior college transfer, and Alexis Reyes, who didn't play much at East Carolina. And then Ike Nweke, the graduate transfer from Columbia, who could be the second coming of Ike Azotam if he can stay healthy, but he's had shoulder issues too. So this is going to be another year for Quinnipiac where the guards are head and shoulders above everybody else in the conference, but they're going to get killed inside, especially with the lack of front court depth. So I don't know what to make to the Bobcats. I want to see what they do in the first couple of weeks of MAAC play and how they adjust.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. I just need to see him do it before I really believe in them.
Yeah, 6 years now.
Yeah. I'm not as I mean, I'm pretty high on Fairfield too, and you've got them next, and I think everybody feels like they've got the depth, and Jay Young's building something there, and now they have a pretty shiny new building too. So what exciting times in Fairfield.
They do, and now another benefit of having me on so close to the season, I've already seen Fairfield. I was at the exhibition Sunday at Rutgers, so my belief and my opinion of the Stags is a little more informed now. The depth is certainly there. I think Mekhi Willis, who didn't really get to do much last season before he got shut down, could be one of the top 6 men in the conference. He did very well coming off the bench. Alan Jean Rose is probably going to get more minutes as a 4. I love what Jay is doing with Cook and Mido as a platoon at the 5, where you're not really overextending one big man. You're letting them both play equal minutes. I think as the season goes on, that'll turn into like a 25-15 kind of deal where Cook gets the majority of them. But Fairfield, from a depth standpoint, is a lot like the Monmouth teams with Robinson and Seaborn, and you had Chris Brady and you had Quinn and Abizabe behind him to back him up. Fairfield is a lot like those Monmouth teams in terms of depth and how fresh they could keep the bodies on the floor. And I think that's going to bode very well for them.
All right. So this is either a good omen for you or a terrible omen for you. And that's that we both are very high on Ryder this year.
Oh, boy.
I have Ryder second, but I had them really high last year and it really bit me in the butt. But geez, I guess we saw a little bit of what we both think is going to happen in March last year. Why are you so high on Ryder?
Because they have everybody back except Demencio Vaughn and 2 transfers coming in plus 1 guy who sat out. So Kevin Badgett can replace Vaughn. I like Tariq Ingram, the transfer from Wake Forest. He's going to make things so much easier on that front court. Jerry doesn't have to do as much as he did last year. Tyrell Bladen, who tore his ACL in the preseason, is back too. So the bench that Ryder really didn't have to its full contingent last season is back. And then in the backcourt, behind Murray and Powell, you have Alan Bertrand, who was at Rhode Island, and then before that, Townsend. So he's played at a higher level. If he's healthy, he's going to be just as good as any second or third team guy in the conference. And I forgot about Mervyn James, who's going to slide down to the 3. If he stays out of foul trouble, he's a 15, 16 game scorer. So Ryder has the pieces. They've always been one of the best defenses in the MAAC from a points per possession standpoint. I think they've averaged like 0.94 or 0.95 over the last 6 years, and that gets largely ignored and isn't paid as much attention to as it should. Ryder's going to be really good.
Yeah, I believe it too. I hate to see them get off to a slow start. There's no real reason for it because of all the returning players they have. There's no reason to start slow. So it's something I think we'll see right away how good they're going to be.
Yeah, and then now Badgett doesn't have to answer the question, oh, you can't win in the quarterfinals.
That's right. I teased all off season that I was going to pick Ryder first. I didn't.
Yeah, me too.
But I obviously have them second, and I have them second by a good chunk. I think it's 1 and 1A. I really do think a lot of Ryder. But like everybody else on the planet, I'm gonna pick the Gales first. I have no reason not to. So let's try this a different way, because we know all the reasons why we expect Iona to be really good. So I'll let you talk about that. But I also want to say, if for some reason Iona does not reach the level that people think, why wouldn't they? So let's see what you think.
Probably because all the new personnel hasn't come together the way most people thought it would. I think there are more question marks with this Iona team than last year, and I feel like you share a similar mindset, just in terms of having 6 or 7 new guys compared to last year, where the roster turnover was not necessarily minimal, but more easily mitigated, if that makes any kind of sense. I think Pitino's going to have to do more work with his player development, which has always been second to none. So we're gonna see a non-conference where Iona might be 6-4 or something close to that. It might not be as successful as last year, but it could be more fruitful going into MAAC play. I think the newcomers will make their mark, but if it doesn't happen, it's because it took a little longer for them to flow.
But yeah, I definitely want to talk more about the non-conference schedule with you, but let me backtrack to last year for a minute. The two biggest reasons I kind of harped on all off season for Iona's February into March. I don't want to call it a collapse, but a downgrade in performance was one. I think there was some burnout because the season started so early when they went, since they were in Greece in August. And then two, I think the switch that Pitino made in minutes, going with Walter Clayton instead of Barrick Jean-Louis, I think kind of changed the dynamic of the team a bit. We weren't you can just look, if you looked at our Ken Palm ratings on defense, they dropped like a stone once that kind of change happened and Barrick was on the bench more. Those are the two reasons that I keep going back to is why they didn't play as well down the stretch. What do you think?
You're a lot higher on Jean-Louis than I am. And I'm not saying that I don't doubt the kid, but I think his impact on the defensive end gets lost in the shuffle and it was easy to do that when you have an Adefo in the conference and you have a Josh Roberts and a Warren Williams at Manhattan, both of whom were talented shot blockers in their own right. So it was easy to lose sight of a Barrick, and even on his own team too with Nelly. So I think he's a little more unhindered this year, if that makes any sense. And for Iona, you got to play him a lot more. I do think his absence was felt in those games against Niagara, against Siena, and especially against Ryder in the MAAC tournament. So I want to see what they do there.
Okay. So to your earlier point, again, without I think Iona's non-conference performance last year was helped by a lot by the fact that they were playing since August. They were a little more together than maybe some of their opponents were.
No question.
In those games in November and December. Whereas now, again, a tough schedule again, but now not that advantage of having been playing together since August. So yeah, I'm feeling like 6-5 would be a great accomplishment against this schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of tough mid-major games. Vermont being one of them, New Mexico being one of them, St. Louis at home being one of them. A team that could be in the top, could be ranked when they come to Hines.
Yeah, but
Hofstra as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you that we might see the fruits of this labor, and I don't think we'll see a February meltdown and especially any kind of collapse in March. There's no reason to believe this team won't be more on all cylinders at that time. And not to say that they can't lose in the MAAC tournament. We've both been around the block to know that anybody can fall in the MAAC tournament, but I would like their chances better going in this year if we see a stronger February.
Yeah, as well you should. You always want to be playing your best basketball going into the tournament. I think if Iona can get to, and Rick always says he wants to be at a 7 or an 8. If they can get to a 6 or a 7, I like where they stand.
Okay. All right. Well, before I let you go, let's get into some all MAAC projections. Again, these things were altered a bit by what happened at Manhattan. Most people, I think, had Jose Perez, as did I, as player of the year. preseason.
Me too.
And so, first of all, let's start off with that. Who is going to replace him with that honor in your mind?
It's Nelly Jr. Joseph. He was the clear runner-up to Perez. I think he's probably the best pro prospect in the MAAC, and Dwight Murray is right behind him in that sense. Murray was the distant third in the 3-horse race. Now it's really Nelly's award to lose, unless Jenkins shows up and bursts on the scene the way everybody has suggested he might. But outside of Shavar Reynolds last season at Monmouth, I've been around the MAAC 11 years. That was the first time I've ever seen a transfer on an all-conference team in the preseason sight unseen. So I can understand why Jenkins wasn't on there. I think it's Nelly's award to lose.
Okay. So the first team took a little bit of a shuffle too with Perez gone. So I'm going to assume that you've changed your picks, and somebody from your second team got a promotion. So can you run through your other 4 first team members for us?
Yeah, Nelly, Murray, Powell. I have Supreme Cook now from Fairfield on there, who was on my second team. And I think now, after seeing what he did in the exhibition at Rutgers, while limited, he's still coming off a minor knee surgery in the offseason. If he plays 25, 28 minutes a game, he could be almost a double-double threat, and he'll be good enough. And I think Matt Blanc, Quinnipiac's top returning guard, is the next best option there.
All right. Well, I mean, everybody here, I'm assuming anybody who's listened to this podcast a while knows who you are, probably already follows you on Twitter, probably already follows Daily Dose of Hoops at blogspot.com and everywhere else that you show up and appear, and Twitter Spaces and all that other fun stuff. But if you're not, do so. Jaden has been the MAAC guru for quite a while. He's getting a little pressure from Sam these days, I think, but Jaden's been doing it a lot longer, so he still gets the edge in our book. Jaden, thanks for coming on, man, and we're going to see you during the season.
Absolutely, Guy. Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right, take care, man.
You too.
Thanks, as always, to Jaden Daly for stopping by to help us prepare for MAAC life. But now we look back ahead to where we are in the OOC. See you all at Mohegan next Friday. Let's cash in on this part of our slate and put us in position for a great season. Go Gales.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the IonaHoops.com podcast. This podcast is a production of IonaHoops.com and its publisher Guy Filatico. The opinions shared during this podcast are those of Guy Filatico, IonaHoops.com, and any featured guests. This podcast is not affiliated with Iona University Athletics or the university itself. Thank you for supporting IonaHoops.com.